Fit, a podcast that shines a light on the unique paths and voices in the marketing and communications industry. Brought to you by the CCNY AAF Student Chapter. My name is Mooney Karchi, president of the AAF Student Chapter here at CCNY.
My name is Lupita and I'm an advertising and public relations major. I'm also a senior and I'm interested in writing and content development. Tonight we are with Alex Suazo, Vice President, Digital and Social at Finn Partners Midwest.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. Honestly, we spent like an entire week looking through your bios and info and stuff because there's just a lot of things that we want to cover here, a lot of things that we want to dig out of you for our audiences because I think you have a really interesting perspective to share. So you've had a very impressive career, like about 10 years after graduating from CCNY. Like, can you tell us about your journey from the ad PR student and then from like the big program and your very first internship at Y&R to now as a vice president?
Yeah, it's quite the journey. I've been calling it a career journey that hasn't ended yet. So yeah, for the last 10 plus years, I've had quite the build of a career journey, starting from, my undergrad at MCA at CCNY, all the way up to now being in the Midwest and working for, a large global PR firm. And there's been a lot of steps in between there. So I would definitely start with MCA. I actually started at CCNY as an engineering major. It didn't last very long. I realized very quickly that I was much better at talking and persuasion and marketing than I was at math and science. And it's all right. I owned it. Finished my degree, really loved the media and communications program at CCNY. I think it really helped position me as both a leader and like an influencer in terms of like marketing communications and marketing strategy. And I think I came out of that program like super ready to hit the ground running. I personally was, I like grew up on AOL, downloading music, AOL chats. I'm like, I feel so old. My millennials will know what I'm talking about. And I just kind of already had that like online, like digital social interest, right? So I wanted to figure out like, how am I going to merge these things together? I love to blog. I already love Twitter. This was in, 2008, 2009. But I also wanted to like stay true to everything that I'd learned at CCNY in the MCA program. So I ended up, as you guys know, there's kind of the advertising track and the PR track. So I originally actually interned at Young and Rubicam and I worked on the Campbell's account and I did that for one semester. And I was like, I'm going to try them both. So I'll do one semester at Y&R and then I'll do, another semester, like another internship, kind of more on like the PR and marketing side of things. So my time at Young and Rubicam was fun. I definitely learned a lot of the layers of account management and, that it can take a while to really get to that strategic role that you might want, working on the big brand, doing the big creative problem solving and the big campaigns. So it was a total juxtaposition to like then go work at Shiraz Events, which was a event production and catering company doing all PR and marketing for them. So I interned for them like over the summer after I graduated. And they actually ended up extending me a full-time offer, which was really awesome. I ended up taking the role. It was a very small group of event producers and like a CEO and a finance guy, like super nimble, small team. And I was essentially doing a ton of PR and like pitching, which was not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I was doing it. And I was also doing the marketing and essentially trying to encourage them to like play around a little more on Facebook and Twitter. And then I essentially became like a key partner in launching a new, so I don't even know if they do these anymore, especially not during like a pandemic, but like media sometimes does like these big press events, right, for different like products. And my event production company wanted to essentially host their own to kind of alleviate the costs for brands. So basically like we would be the middleman, get brands to show up, get all the media there. And then they would have like this great, short and long lead opportunity to like meet with media, do the desk sides that they would normally do maybe separately, but get it at like a better cost by doing it all together. So that was called the Holiday Lookbook. And out of nowhere, recent grad, I like became the event producer, the like sales and marketing person for that event. I did it 2 years in a row, like along with many of my other responsibilities at Shiraz events. And honestly, I just felt like I wanted to focus more on social. I remember doing an event for New York Fashion Week, and we had a bunch of events across the city. And I was like, guys, we need to be like at Grand Central Station, being like the hub of New York Fashion Week on Twitter and sharing pictures from everywhere we are. And it wasn't a priority for them, unfortunately. So I ended up, starting to look for roles. I'm a big proponent, and you'll hear this throughout kind of the rest of my career, which goes a little faster, that I feel if you aren't being challenged anymore, if you feel like you need to keep learning more, assess the situation financially, where you are in your career, but start looking for those roles, like know your worth and network and reach out, like regardless of whether you're going to, get a new job tomorrow or in 6 months. So I started networking, and I actually ended up going back agency side, but also at a very small agency. It was essentially like the digital marketing agency for Castrol USA, which is motor oil. So I went from like fabulous New York City, like New York Fashion Week, to talking to like NFL fans, MLS fans, and Indy car racing fans. So it was this huge jump in terms of audience and content development. But I essentially got a role as like a social strategist at the time, like building all of Castrol USA's content, as well as being a liaison for Castrol Español's Latin digital agency. And so in that role, it was a very small firm. I was doing a lot of community management and social day to day, a lot of content development. And I think just like at a year or so, I was kind of like, I need to learn more. I'm not being challenged enough, right? Like there's so much more going on. At the time, content marketing was really starting to like be a thing. Facebook had partners at like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to like Gen Z, but like, I hope millennials listening to this understand me.
Give us some credit.
There was a company called Buddy Media that I was like certified in, that legit like essentially integrated with Facebook, when Facebook used to have tabs, and you would like create content for the tabs. So it was like this whole content marketing like renaissance that was happening on Facebook. And so I was a big part of that. And I just wanted to do more. Like I wanted to scale, do more for more brands or for a brand, but in-house if I could. So with all of that in mind, I started applying again. This time, I felt like I had a ton of social experience now, right? Based on like my peers and colleagues also working kind of in the same industry, within like marketing and social. And I actually stumbled on a role at MWW PR, which was within the new business department. And so you're probably like, that sounds very different from saying that you want to work on a brand and build a bunch of content and scale. But what I actually realized at the time was like, hey, maybe a lot of brands aren't doing this right now, but if they are, they're probably going to an agency to have it done. And I'd like to be at an agency that's maybe more focused on that like PR and social integration. So I went to MWW PR. I will say it. So I was based out of Westchester County, right outside of New York City. And I worked out of like the headquarters in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It was like on a good day, a 2-hour commute door to door one way. So it was a great time, like at MWW PR. I learned a lot. I worked on a lot of new business pitches for social for clients like McDonald's. I remember working on something for like Rolls-Royce. I was like, this is awesome. Like these are the brands that are innovating right now and really want to be doing social. Unfortunately, I think the PR firm just didn't really have the teams, the scope to really like support the work that the clients were coming for. And so they weren't like winning as much business in social specifically. So again, I was like, what is going on? Like, how am I going to get this like scale and learn as much as I want to learn and be challenged, without really diving into just like a huge project. So that was really where I went back in-house. I really felt like I had to find a brand that I could really spend some time with, learn the brand, learn the audiences, and be able to flex across a marketing team. So after MWW PR, I actually got a role at Fairway Market. I will say, and I can speak to this a little bit later, a lot of these for me came through networking. like most of them came through someone that I knew. So someone had introduced me to the CIO of Fairway Market. And I guess at the time, like he was kind of owning digital and social, or he was kind of that like liaison. Again, like social and digital is never known like where to be within an organization. So I was actually hired by the CIO to work within the IT organization as like a liaison with the marketing team, and work with them to essentially end up building their first loyalty mobile app. Now, at what point in the last 5 minutes I've been talking, whatever, have I even mentioned like mobile apps and digital products, right? Like no experience in it. But what I did have, and what I think the CEO really saw in me, was like, one, passion, eagerness to just like jump in and get it done. But two, I had been doing a lot of content development, and I had been working on a lot of like social media marketing strategy, if you will, right? So that combo in and of itself definitely helped with like all the parts of building this loyalty program and this mobile app that was very much focused on, like, they weren't even called foodies then. It was like early foodies that loved Fairway Market. So I was there for about 3 years. And that was actually around the time I decided to also get a master's. So essentially, you know, I felt like I had this great undergrad experience, and I kind of bounced around a little bit, right? I played around in social, I played around with PR, I was in new business, but I still didn't feel like I would ever get, I don't know, I just kept thinking of like this dream role that was like completely integrated and like supporting a whole team of just integrated marketing. And so I felt like maybe I needed that like additional degree, you know, or like additional education. So I ended up going back to CCNY for the pilot program of BIC, Branding and Integrated Communications. And essentially worked full time and did that program throughout the 2 years of the program. The intent was definitely at some point to leverage the master's to like get my next role. And so right before graduation, I had started looking again. I had essentially launched the mobile app. It was awesome. I have some examples of it on LinkedIn. It's not around anymore, which is so sad, but it was really beautiful. And I just felt like my role would be specifically mobile apps. And again, being kind of pigeonholed, I just wanted to learn like as much as I could and absorb as much as I could. So then I got this awesome role at New York Cruise Lines. So again, I started applying, looking around. I actually got that job, I just remembered, through my contact at like my first job at Shiraz Events. She was doing event production for New York Cruise Lines and was like, they're looking for a digital lead. And I was like, I need to do this. Now I've got the digital product experience from New York Cruise Lines. I've built a mobile app. I understand web analytics, if you will, like web mobile analytics. I've got the social, I've got the content. What I didn't have yet was like the paid. So I ended up interviewing with the CMO there, very small team with like 5 different brands. It was a crazy scope of sub brands within this company. And I ended up running digital for all of it. And in that role, I got my experience on like the paid side of things, which was like that last little bit that I was looking to get. So again, oversaw like all things from organic social to paid social, retargeting, SEM. I mean, you name it. I was able to like use all of my experience in this role. It was a dream role. And I actually would have stayed in that role, I think, because I would have had really great opportunity, I think, to like continue building on my experience and really become like a leader within, an influential leader, like within that very small team. But my little career bell went off again. I was like, girl, when are you going to work on like the big national brand? So I started applying again. This time it was also a mix of like, you know, you get a lot of scope and you start wanting some support. Like you also can't do it all, right? And for me, like I love mentoring. I wanted to be able to like, you know, get a team or a couple of interns and start like really sharing the work and scaling if possible. And that just at the time wasn't the case. So lo and behold, in 2017, I had started applying around, and on a whim, actually one of my coworkers was like, if you keep going down the same street every day, you're never going to see anything different. And I found this job at American Girl Mattel, based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And it was a very similar role based on the description. So overseeing all things social, paid social, CRM and email marketing, which I was kind of dabbling in at New York Cruise Lines, and then paid, right? Which was like what I really thrived in those 2 to 3 years at New York Cruise Lines. So I decided to relocate to Madison, Wisconsin, and that's where I've been since. At American Girl, I had a team of 3, and we oversaw all things social and digital for American Girl. Obviously in the role, I finally got the scale that I was looking for. I got the awesome brand that I got to work on. And I had incredible partners like across the marketing organization, which was something I really wanted as well, right? Like you need to keep yourself challenged and like work with people that can teach you new things. Loved that role so much. And unfortunately, I'm only no longer there because of some relocation and changes that happened with management and where the team was located. So because of that, in June 2020, I was kind of had to start looking for a new role. So in the fall, I think I applied essentially between July and October to like 100 jobs, and then a connection through American Girl, essentially like saw someone else's post that worked at Fin Partners and tagged me and was like, so-and-so is going to be like a great fit. She referred me and like hit it off right away. And here I am. So based out of, the Midwest still, essentially co-leading digital and social out of the Chicago office, also supporting Detroit, working on, some of the B2C clients that we have because of like my B2C experience, but also doing some B2B stuff. I was on a new business pitch today for like the HVAC industry. So I've, scaled a lot of that experience into a role where I can apply it all, which I think has been like my biggest goal.
So Alex, you mentioned that you were around a lot of men and that's one of the reasons why you sort of left. And it also seems that you love to work with diverse people. So my question to you is, how has being a woman affected your experience in climbing up in the industry? What was some of your hardships and advantages?
Yeah. So I definitely think that, I was thinking back on a lot of this recently because it wasn't until American Girl that I actually had bosses, managers, whatever, that were women. Most of my roles, my leadership, my direct managers were men. At the time, I feel like I was really just learning a lot and I didn't see anything outside of that, right? I think in marketing, a lot of times it tends to skew more female in terms of, women being marketers and being in PR. But I worked with really smart men that taught me a lot about both leadership, but even empathy and team building and things like that. I think I got very lucky. And I was able to take that experience and apply it as a lens for how to work, especially at American Girl. Like I almost feel like all that leadership experience prepared me for going into a situation where it was like 98% women. American Girl is very few men work there. So it was this fascinating like flip of the table where I felt like I took almost all that like masculine leadership, advice and like experience that I'd had through these different leaders and was able to apply that as like a stronger voice in the room. I almost feel like at American Girl sometimes, I think without good structure, unfortunately, I think a lot of women in a room can do a lot of talking and be catty. We all need to focus more on like lifting each other up and not being that way, but it's kind of the nature of that sometimes, so I feel like I was able to really take that experience and those learnings and apply it so that I could be more objective. I mean, I remember like one of these Russian PhDs guys that I worked with was a big proponent of like, stop adding so many fluffy words to your emails. And I was like, what? Like, this is just the way I talk. What do you mean? And he's like, you literally don't need half the words in there. And I think about that all the time. You know what I mean? Like, it's really taught me to be more direct and to not stand down, right? I mean, we may all be tired of hearing like, really sit at the table and lean in, but it's so true. If you sit back, like you're not going to get those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that like is a really interesting perspective because I think at least in the ad PR program now, right, like a majority of our classes are women. And so I think it's a little hard to navigate in a field that is still like kind of male dominated currently, but I think it's starting to expand. And speaking of women, I do really want to like touch back on a little bit of your background, because we talked about this in the briefing of like your childhood and your inspiration through your mother, right? So kind of going back to who you are as a CCNY student, you know, CCNY students are known to be ambitious hustlers. Do you consider yourself an ambitious person? And what were some of the things that influenced you to be a change maker, as you put it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up in a single mom household. And we're like, call her out. Hey, mom. She's badass. I mean, she hustled, man. You know, she, raised us throughout her 20s. I have a younger sister, 4 years younger than me, and we're very different in terms of like the career paths that we took. But then my mom in her 30s, you know, she hadn't finished her BA because, you know, she ended up having me and changed her life. But in her 30s, she ended up finishing her BA and then getting an MBA in HR while raising us, while being single, like while somehow, you know, raising us in a very predominantly white, very expensive neighborhood in Westchester County outside of New York City. I, to this day, don't know how she did it truly. But I think that really, you know, inspired me to work just as hard. Like I just kind of felt like clearly, to me, it felt like clearly the more you put forth, right, the more that you are ambitious and passionate and like put out into the universe, to me, it felt like the more you would get back, right? So she ended up, you know, switching from being a paralegal at her corporate job to moving into HR. And, you know, throughout the last 15 years, essentially building up her career to be an HR business partner globally out of France. And it's like, how, you know, it wasn't so much how do I like grow up to be exactly like her, but more so how do I take those passions of hers, right? And that kind of ability to adapt and to just keep pushing and apply it to my own career. So I don't usually say this out loud, but I'm proud of it now because I actually accomplished it. But for some reason, I just got it in my head that, you know, because my mom didn't have it when she was 30, I was like, I'm going to hustle and I want, you know, a senior title by the time I'm 30, making six figures. And I like pretty much almost accomplished that, which was pretty amazing. So yeah, I think, you know, we all have like our heroines or our heroes and the people that like inspire us to do better and to keep pushing. And that was definitely my mom. And I think, you know, to this day, you know, I think it's also like my family, both sides are immigrants to this country from the Dominican Republic. Like, I think that, there's just that hustle mentality like built in, you know what I mean? And my sister and I still hustle. And the other day I was like, do I need another master's? I probably don't, but I like want to keep challenging myself. I just feel like there's so much to learn. And I'm just one of those people, I think that's always going to be like hungry for learning for more from that perspective, to be challenged.
I could totally relate to you. I'm Mexican, so I understand what you mean by the hustle. And your shirt, the future is Latina.
I keep wanting to be able to see it.
There you go.
I've seen that earlier.
And actually, one of the reasons why I applied to City College was because it's so diverse. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how has the transition from a diverse school into an industry that is oftentimes not as inclusive, especially as someone in a leadership position? What are your views on the importance of having more of a diversity in leadership roles?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. So, you know, like I mentioned, I grew up in like a very predominantly white, many immigrants, I mean, like an Italian Irish community, but like predominantly white community in like 20 miles outside of New York City. And coming to CCNY, I felt the same way. So I actually had no idea how diverse it was. And I've learned now over time, like how diverse CCNY has been from its inception. But I found my people at CCNY, and I feel like my mom in retrospect was like, what is going on? How did you go from like, you know, this white girl, now all of a sudden you're like partying all the time and listening to Dominican music? And I'm like, cause this is who I am, man. Like, I just didn't really live it that way, you know, in middle school and high school. But I found my people there, and it was an incredible experience, Lupita. So to your point, like, I get why you went there, because you just find your tribe there. I will say, coming out of it, you know, there weren't a lot of people of color of any colors really in a lot of those roles. There would definitely be some women in some leadership roles, but, predominantly white in some cases. And like I said, I was mostly reporting into white men in a lot of my roles as well. So I do think that there's a level of empathy that people just don't learn as much of or experience of when they're not in a more diverse environment, right? Like I don't know how someone could possibly understand someone else if they never work with them. I don't know how they could understand someone else's voice or the way they think if they never work with them. So I remember in my role at New York Cruise Lines, we had hired an intern of color. And I remember thinking like, this is awesome. Like me and him connect on a totally different level. Now, how are we going to like work together to make sure that both our voices are heard, but that like we raise up the voices of, any other people of color, women of color that come to work at this company. I definitely think, especially moving to the Midwest, very different like work-life values, right? It's not the hustle in New York City. It's like super lax and let's take our time doing things. And I don't mind it because I'm an old lady now, but it was definitely different, coming out here and working with so many women at a company that was like 98% women and that they were all pretty much white as well. And I could definitely see the limitations in the thinking by not having more, women or people of color in the room. So for me, it's a matter of like doing as much as I can to give back and to mentor, young women or men of color, because I think that like nothing should be holding you back, even if there aren't a lot of people of color in this industry. But I feel like we have to help each other. Like I wish there was like another word for networking, but it's like, it's just so important. Like I 100% hope to keep in touch with all of you and help you all get jobs wherever you want one day, right? Like if we don't do that for each other, how do we like improve the situation? You know what I mean? So I definitely think there's, it's not necessarily like a lack of empathy, but just like a lack of understanding. Like, I just don't know how people can be fully aware of all the different people in America, if you're working with the same type of people all the time. So it's really important. And I feel like we all have to do our own parts, right? To like come together and like help new generations come together. I remember, I want to say it was like an Adweek conference on like Hispanics in America. And I want to say there was like a stat that one of the biggest issues is just the fact that like, there's not as much like connectivity between the different Hispanic cultures, that like, we're seriously thinking about who's Puerto Rican, who's Dominican, who's Mexican, who's Chilean. It's like, dude, we are all Latin, Hispanic in this country. And we need to rally together with all of our other, colored peers and colleagues and like get the jobs we want. Like, why is anybody standing in our way? They shouldn't be.
So you touched a lot on like a lot of different topics, from like being in the industry or just like the different types of marketing and how it's integrated over the last couple of years and such. So for the people who are listening to this now as CCNY students, where and how do you see us fitting into the industry and creating more spaces where our voices can be heard?
I think that's a great question. So I definitely think, first of all, and I feel like I've learned this over the last few years, there is a seat at the table for you. That's how I feel. Like, you have to go into it believing there's a seat at the table for you. And I think that the doubt that there isn't, right, across society, I mean, it's a societal thing. The fact that we think it's not, and it really becomes this bigger thought process that like, no, there's not space for me there, or no, they're not going to listen to me if I'm in there. I think we have to like flip the script on that. You know what I mean? I really believe in like focusing on what you're passionate on and doing everything in your power to get there. Right. And if you do that, I don't really feel like there should be anything in your way. Now, of course, there are things in people's way many times. But that's where I think you need your tribe, you need your people, and you need to build relationships with the people that are going to help you fight for for a seat at that table. I definitely think that there are like certain areas of PR and advertising and content and media and like publisher partnerships. There's just so many different places that our voices should be heard and where we should be at the table. And so I sometimes think, I mean, I would have the luxury, I guess I'll say, you know, early on in my career to like test the water in different things, right? And so I think that helped me figure out my voice and my seat at the table. But I realized that like, I mean, we're in a pandemic, like getting jobs are hard. But I think that the more that you can do, to just keep hustling and learning and finding out where those places are that you can grow, learn from, network with. So like I mean, the reality is I spent like 5 months unemployed, I don't even know anymore, bunch of months unemployed in 2020. And I didn't stop, man. And I don't know why I didn't, because then I got a job and I was like, oh my God, I should have taken these 5 months off and done whatever I wanted. But I was on Adweek conferences every day. I was networking and connecting with new people. I was also had the luxury of like paying for this like strategic certificate course. Like I just think that if it's something you're passionate about, you have to give it 110% and like 150, 200%. Because if you don't, someone else is absolutely going to beat you there, and it'll suck if it's another white person. That sounded so bad. Or was that quotable? Dropped
no, that was the best closing note you could have given this show. Cut the episode, put it in post. Like that was powerful. So Alex, you mentioned a lot of great points today, like on camera and also off camera. And I just want to run through them real quickly, just so that the audience has these notes on hand, because I think these are really, really useful insights, right? So you mentioned balance, having a passion and trusting your gut no matter what, being influential rather than dominant. That's how you become a change maker. What problem are you trying to solve? Start with the consumer journey always. And from a communication perspective, navigate through those experiences and be empathetic. Networking, but through a sense of community to constantly help other people grow, and constantly being hungry, wanting to grow and to keep learning, and be as visual as possible. Plug in those visual cues no matter what to show others who you are. And being in a room, be present and always have your voice being heard. And so I'm sure everyone who's listening is definitely going to take these and put them into their back pocket for their use. And it's been a pleasure having you. So thank you so much for joining us here on the Where We Fit platform, and for kind of helping us navigate to our audiences how you fit in the industry and how we can navigate through the industry.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your influential knowledge about the industry. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex, again. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm sure a lot of people will take a lot of things that you had said. We cannot wait for this to go live, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you guys for tuning in with Where We Fit, a podcast celebrating the unique paths and voices of the marketing and communications industry. Brought to you by the CCNY AAF Student Chapter. Make sure to follow us on our Instagram accounts for all the latest updates at Where We Fit Pod and at AAF City College. We'll see you in the next episode.